Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I'm still extremely upset about the whole ordeal. Who parks their car so close to someone else's space, blocking their way? And then, to make matters worse, they have the audacity to report me to the HOA when I accidentally hit the gutter trying to avoid their car. I'm not even going to get into the racial slurs and expletives they hurled at me when I politely asked them to move their vehicle. It's just unbelievable. I've been living in this detached garage for a while now, and I've never had any issues with the HOA. But now, I'm starting to think they're more interested in nickel and diming homeowners than actually helping us. I mean, who revokes the right to call a towing service because of people hating on each other in the community? It's ridiculous. If someone's parking in a way that's obstructing traffic or blocking someone's parking spot, shouldn't the HOA be doing something about it? But I digress. The real issue here is the gutter. I didn't mean to hit it, and I thought it was part of my property. I mean, it's right in front of my garage, for crying out loud. But no, the HOA claims it's their responsibility, and now they're telling me I have to foot the bill for the repairs. I'm talking potentially 5 figures here. As a poor college student, that's just not something I can afford. I've tried to explain the situation to the HOA, but I'm not sure they're listening. I sent them an email detailing what happened, including the fact that my neighbor's parking habits are a regular problem. But all I got back was a generic response saying they'd send someone to fix the gutter and I'd be billed for the repairs. No acknowledgement of the circumstances leading up to the accident. No offer to work with me to find a solution. Just a cold, impersonal email. I'm worried that they're going to take advantage of me. I've heard horror stories about contractors overcharging for repairs, and I'm afraid that's exactly what's going to happen here. The HOA will hire some contractor to fix the gutter, and then they'll pass the inflated bill on to me. I'm willing to take responsibility for my actions and pay for the repairs, but I want to make sure I'm not getting ripped off. I've got photos of the gutter, and I'm hoping that will help my case. But I'm not holding my breath. The HOA seems more interested in covering their own backsides than in working with homeowners to find a fair solution. And my neighbor? Forget about it. He's just happy to have caused trouble and gotten me in hot water with the HOA. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole thing. I mean, I know I made a mistake, but it wasn't intentional. And I'm willing to own up to it and pay for the repairs. But I don't think it's fair that I'm being punished for someone else's bad behavior. If the HOA had done their job and enforced the parking rules, this whole thing could have been avoided. As it stands, I'm just waiting to hear back from the HOA about the repairs. I'm bracing myself for the worst, but I'm hoping that somehow, some way, they'll see reason and work with me to find a fair solution. But until then, I'm stuck in limbo, wondering how I'm going to afford to fix a gutter that I didn't even know was the HOA's responsibility in the first place. Every day since the incident, I've found myself stewing over it. I can't seem to shake the frustration and disbelief. It's one thing to have a dispute with a neighbor, but to feel like the entire system is against you is something else entirely. I've always been a rule follower, the kind of person who goes out of their way to avoid conflict. So finding myself in this mess is really jarring. I talked to some of my friends about it, and their responses have been mixed. Some think I should just pay the bill and be done with it, while others say I should fight the charges and even consider legal action. Honestly, I'm not sure what the best course of action is. Part of me wants to stand up for myself and refuse to pay for something that wasn't entirely my fault. But another part of me just wants this whole thing to be over, even if it means giving in. My parents, bless their hearts, have been supportive, but they're also worried. They know how tight my finances are and how stressful this situation is for me. They offered to help me out financially, but I really don't want to burden them. They've already done so much for me, and I feel like I need to handle this on my own. It's a tough spot to be in, caught between pride and practicality. And then there's the matter of my studies. This whole ordeal has been a huge distraction. I've got exams coming up, and instead of focusing on my textbooks, I'm preoccupied with thoughts of legal documents and repair costs. It's hard to concentrate when you're constantly worrying about what's going to happen next. I even missed a couple of classes because I was on the phone with the HOA, trying to get some clarity on the situation. The lack of transparency from the HOA is what really gets to me. If they had just taken the time to explain things properly and offered a bit of empathy, I might not be feeling so resentful. Instead, they've treated me like just another problem to be dealt with, rather than a member of the community. It's disheartening, to say the least. Every interaction with them feels like I'm talking to a brick wall. I've tried calling, emailing, even visiting their office in person. Each time, I get the same cold, bureaucratic responses. It's like they have a script they're following, and no matter what I say, they just repeat the same lines back to me. It's infuriating. My neighbor, on the other hand, is living his life without a care in the world. I still see his car parked haphazardly, causing problems for other residents too. But he seems to have a knack for avoiding any consequences. It's almost like he enjoys the chaos he creates. I've seen him smirk when he sees me struggling to maneuver my car around his. It's like a game to him. One of the most frustrating parts of this whole mess is feeling so powerless. I've always been taught that if you do the right thing, things will work out. But in this case, it feels like no matter how hard I try to do the right thing, I keep getting punished. It's a real test of patience and resilience. I did some research online to see if there were any similar cases and how they were resolved. I found a few stories of people in HOA disputes, and they all seem to share one thing in common: a feeling of helplessness. It's like these organizations have all the power and the residents have none. Some people manage to get their issues resolved by rallying other residents and creating a united front. Others ended up moving out, unable to deal with the stress. Moving out isn't really an option for me right now. I've got a lease, and breaking it would just add to my financial woes. Plus, I've put a lot of effort into making this place feel like home. It's not perfect, but it's mine. Or at least, it was until this whole gutter fiasco started. I thought about talking to a lawyer, but the cost of legal fees is another burden I can't afford. I did get a free consultation, though. The lawyer I spoke with was sympathetic, but he also warned me that HOA disputes can be long and drawn out. He said I might end up spending more on legal fees than on the actual repair costs. It's a catch-22. So here I am, stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm trying to stay optimistic, hoping that the HOA will eventually see reason and work with me. But with each passing day, that hope dwindles a little more. I've even started to avoid coming home as much as possible, just to escape the constant reminder of the situation. I spend more time at the library or at friends' places, anywhere but here. The thought of taking out a loan has crossed my mind, but taking on more debt is the last thing I need. I'm already stretched thin with tuition and living expenses. Adding another financial burden could tip the scales and send me into a spiral. It's a delicate balance, and I'm trying hard to maintain it. What frustrates me the most is the feeling of injustice. I didn't ask for this situation. I didn't park my car recklessly or intentionally damage the gutter. I was trying to navigate a difficult situation caused by someone else's inconsiderate behavior. And yet, I'm the one facing the consequences. It just doesn't seem fair. I've started documenting everything. Every interaction with the HOA. Every time I see my neighbor's car parked improperly. Every email and phone call. I want to have a clear record of what's happening, just in case I need it. Maybe it's a small step, but it makes me feel a little more in control. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I think about what I would say to my neighbor if I could get him to listen. I'd tell him how his actions have affected me, how they've caused me so much stress and worry. But I doubt he'd care. He seems to thrive on conflict, and I'm just another target. And then there are times when I wonder if I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm letting this situation get to me more than it should. Maybe I should just suck it up, pay the bill, and move on. But then I remember the principle of the matter. It's not just about the money. It's about fairness and accountability. And I don't want to let that go. As I sit here, writing this all down, I realize that I'm not alone. There are countless people out there dealing with similar issues, feeling just as frustrated and helpless as I do. Maybe that's some small comfort. Knowing that I'm not the only one struggling with an unjust situation gives me a bit of strength. I guess, for now, all I can do is keep pushing forward. Keep trying to find a way to resolve this mess without losing my sanity or my financial stability. It's a tough road, but I'm determined to see it through. Maybe, just maybe, things will work out in the end. But until then, I'm bracing myself for whatever comes next. The days seem to drag on, each one a blur of classes, work, and endless worry about the gutter repair bill. I find myself checking my email obsessively, hoping for a response from the HOA that offers some sort of resolution. But nothing comes, just more silence, more waiting. I've started to feel like I'm living in a perpetual state of anxiety. It's there when I wake up in the morning, when I'm sitting in lectures, and even when I'm trying to fall asleep at night. It's a constant, nagging presence that I can't seem to shake. I've tried talking to friends and family about it, but there's only so much they can do. They listen, they offer advice, but they can't change the situation. One evening, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. As I walked past the other houses, I wondered if any of my neighbors were dealing with similar issues. I thought about knocking on a few doors, asking if they had any problems with the HOA or the same neighbor, but I didn't. I didn't want to come across as a complainer or stir up more trouble. Instead, I walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench, watching the sunset. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. For a brief moment, I managed to push my worries aside and just enjoy the moment. But as soon as I started heading back home, the anxiety returned, heavier than ever. Back at my place, I decided to do something proactive. I spent the next few hours drafting a more detailed email to the HOA. I laid out my case clearly, attached photos of the gutter in my neighbor's car, and reiterated my willingness to pay for the repairs if they could provide a fair estimate and consider the mitigating circumstances. I hit send, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. At least I was trying to do something. The next day, I finally got a response from the HOA. They acknowledged my email but reiterated their stance. The repairs would be made, and I would be billed. No discussion, no compromise, just a cold, impersonal directive. It was disheartening, to say the least. In a fit of frustration, I called my parents again. This time, I let my emotions show. I vented about the unfairness of the situation, the stress it was causing me, and my fears about the future. My mom listened patiently, her voice soothing as she tried to calm me down. My dad, ever the pragmatic one, suggested I attend the next HOA meeting and present my case in person. It was a good idea, and I decided to give it a shot. The day of the meeting, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I dressed in my best business casual attire, hoping to make a good impression. When I arrived, I was surprised to see a decent turnout. It seemed like I wasn't the only one with grievances. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and approached the podium. I outlined my situation clearly, emphasizing the unfairness of being held solely responsible for the repairs. I pointed out my neighbor's repeated parking violations and the lack of enforcement from the HOA. I concluded by asking for a fair resolution, one that took into account the circumstances leading up to the accident. There was a moment of silence after I finished, then a few murmurs from the crowd. The board members looked at each other, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the head of the HOA thanked me for sharing my concerns and said they would take my case under advisement. It wasn't the immediate resolution I had hoped for, but it was something. As I left the meeting, a few other residents approached me, sharing their own stories of frustration with the HOA. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone, but it also made me realize how widespread the issues were. Something needed to change, not just for me, but for the entire community. In the following weeks, I continued to document everything. I kept a log of my neighbors' parking habits, took more photos, and saved every email and letter from the HOA. I even reached out to some of the other residents I met at the meeting, forming a small support group. We started sharing tips and advice, trying to find ways to navigate the HOA's bureaucratic maze. Despite the ongoing stress, I found a small sense of empowerment in taking action. I wasn't just a passive victim anymore. I was actively trying to change my situation. It didn't solve the problem overnight, but it helped me cope. Then, one morning, I received an email from the HOA that made my heart sink. They had scheduled the gutter repair for the following week and included an estimate of the costs. As I feared, the bill was exorbitant. I felt the weight of despair settle over me again. How was I ever going to afford this? I called my parents, tears in my eyes as I explained the latest development. They offered to help again, but I couldn't bring myself to accept. I needed to find another way. I reached out to the support group, and one of the members suggested we pool our resources to hire an independent contractor for a second opinion. It was a long shot, but I agreed. We found a contractor willing to assess the damage and provide an estimate. His quote was significantly lower than the HOA's, and he explained that the repairs were relatively minor. Armed with this new information, I drafted another email to the HOA, challenging their estimate and providing the independent contractor's quote. The waiting game began again. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing. My anxiety was through the roof, and I was struggling to stay focused on my studies. Every time I saw my neighbor's car parked haphazardly, my anger flared anew. It was a constant reminder of the unfairness I was dealing with. Finally, just when I was about to lose hope, I received a response from the HOA. They had reviewed the independent contractor's quote and agreed to let me use his services for the repair. It was a small victory, but a significant one. I felt a surge of relief wash over me. The contractor completed the repairs quickly and efficiently, and I paid a fraction of what the HOA's original estimate had been. It didn't erase the frustration and stress of the past months, but it was a step toward resolution. I was still on edge, wary of what might come next, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. Looking back, the whole ordeal was a harsh lesson in navigating bureaucracy and standing up for myself. It showed me the importance of persistence and the power of community. I still had a lot of unresolved feelings about the HOA and my neighbor, but at least I had managed to avoid financial ruin. As I move forward, I know I'll be more cautious and proactive in dealing with similar situations. I'll continue to document everything, stay informed about my rights, and lean on my support system when things get tough. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a start. And for now, that's enough. So if you're driving along and someone from the opposite direction suddenly serves towards or partially into your lane, you are reflexively going to try steering out of the way. You'll just take the hit every time. And I agree Op was at fault for damaging the downspout. At this point, they have no way of proving someone else caused them to swerve. Op should have found a different route around the building in the whole neighbor's car. Or been driving slow enough to not have damaged it. But hindsight is 20/20. That's not what the OP did. They blame the neighbor, but again, that's not the issue. The issue is now having to deal with the HOA that wants to fix it. And rather than having the OP fix it, they're planning to hire someone to fix it, which of course drives up the cost of something simple that can be done for less than $50 in an afternoon's worth of work.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.